Happening, everybody. Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo is here. I'm Bob Wankel. Early on a Monday morning. Phillies coming off of a weekend in which they lost 2 out of 3 games to the Baltimore Orioles. Earlier in the week, they lose 2 out of 3 to the Boston Red Sox. And then, of course, dating back to last Sunday, you had that meltdown against the Mets. All of a sudden, you look up, they've lost 5 of their last 7 games. Offense didn't do much this past weekend. Zach Wheeler was bombed yesterday. Aaron Nola shelled against the Red Sox his last time out. And all of a sudden, teams leaking a little bit of oil. Now, Anthony, there are 2 different ways to sort of look at this, and this is, I think, how people have processed the last week. There are some people that are saying, look, they're 23 games over 500. They have a massive lead in the NL East. What are we even talking about? They're allowed to have one bad week. And then there are people saying, hey, look, the quality of opponent has raised here recently. And all of a sudden, you're seeing a team that doesn't look so infallible all of a sudden. And so I think that there probably are some valid concerns, and then there's probably some overreactions. And what you and I think, are tasked with doing today is sort of sorting through everything that we've seen and trying to figure out what's what here. So I'll bring you in, and I guess the first question is just your overall big picture opinion about what we saw this weekend.
I think that we're at a spot, Bob, where it's easy to overreact, but at the same time, I do think that there are enough signs of things where you got to say you can't just ignore it. So this is a little bit of a hedge, but I think that there are elements of both that you can kind of look at and say, yeah, there were things that were working against the Phillies. Don't worry, it'll be okay. And there are also things where you sit there and go, yeah, but boy, this guy looked bad, and this guy hasn't looked good, et cetera, and have legitimate concerns. So I think that you can have both things be true in this instance, not to steal a Kevin Kincaid line, but you can do that. You can have 2 things be true at the same time here. And I think that that's probably the sweet spot for analysis of where the Phillies are after losing 5 of 7 games.
So you look up, they're 23 games over 500 right now. They're 47-24. The last 10 games in which they've been in London and in Boston and in Baltimore, they're 5-5. Mm-hmm. So big picture, you take a breath and you realize, okay, it's not so bad. And it's not so bad, but I'm going to hit you with a little bit of a curveball at the start of this show today.
Yeah.
And I am going to do some role playing. I'm going to be the guy that is out on this team that says, same old Phillies, they have obvious flaws. We saw them this past week. This is what they really are. Yeah, they beat up a bunch of cupcakes. Like I'm going to take on that persona here for the next, 15, 20 minutes. And full disclosure, the disclaimer, I have some concerns about this team. I do not feel all in the way that I'm about to kind of jump into this role. Again, role playing here. So I'm going to kind of go to an extreme and be that guy that we see online or that we see or hear call in radio stations and bitch about this team. Okay. So that's what we're going to do here. So let me start by saying this. Big series, kind of billed as a potential World Series preview. Orioles, Phillies. You and I have both picked this matchup to play out in late October. One team looked like they kind of were ready to rise to the occasion this weekend. The other team sort of didn't do shit, especially offensively. 3 games, 10 runs the Phillies scored. In the first 9 innings of the 3 games total, they scored 7 runs. Now, yesterday, I see Gunnar Henderson, Ali Rushman. I see their guys go out and do it. I don't see the Phillies doing anything. I didn't see the Phillies guys really doing much of anything this weekend. Like, what's the deal here? Because if you want to, I'm gonna lean into the negativity. I'm gonna lean into being that guy. We talk all the time. Oh, Phillies, this team, they're focused and they have something to prove, and they have it in their DNA. They're winners. Well, guess what? They weren't winners with a 2-1 lead in the World Series in 22. They weren't winners in game 6 and 7 of the NLCS last year. You put them on national TV a couple times this year. They haven't played particularly well. And then they had the biggest series to date of the season, and they were pretty damn underwhelming. So what's your response to that?
I think we should just clip that little soundbite up without the caveat in the beginning and just put that out there, and it'll do great on social media. It'll do awesome. No,
and I'd be hosting the midday show on WIP.
Exactly. No, and my response to it is, look, it's fair to question these things in the moment. It certainly is. But you look at it, they just played this series without two of their regulars. There's no question, right? And a third one who was just coming back off of missing time. So that has to be put into the consideration. They played this series against Baltimore at the end of a brutal, and I don't even say at the end, towards the end of a brutal schedule, because Major League Baseball did them no favors by forcing them to play again tonight. Start another series, no day off, right, against the Padres. So I mean, like, this, to me, this should have been an off day in the calendar, and then they should have played Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But the reality of it is that they have had a brutal travel schedule, and I'm not trying to blame the travel schedule, because you have to look at each game individually and say what went well, what did not go well. But the fact of the matter is, when you take in the collective, I mean, it's not easy to do what they've done in the past few weeks, starting out with the West Coast and coming back home, and then going to London, and then going to Boston, and then going to Baltimore, right? And then coming back home and playing the next day again. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask these guys to do. It's not an excuse. They should do better than they've been, but you could start to understand why within those little frameworks, little things maybe don't work, or one guy or two guys that you thought would be better just weren't in those instances. So I try to look at more of the big picture, and I say my concerns are with guys who have struggled more than just this 10-game stretch, right? Like, to me, those are bigger concerns. Like, I look at Zach Wheeler's start yesterday, and it was not good. I mean, he was really not good. He was leaving balls over the plate. Really, his velo was down on a couple pitches. Just really not good location. And I said to myself, am I worried about Zach Wheeler? I'm not. He became the first Philly since Vicente Padilla to give up 4 home runs in a game and eight or more runs, and the first one to do it since 1921 on the road. Like, I don't worry about Zach Wheeler. I don't suddenly think he stinks, But do I have concerns over some other players who have had more prolonged struggles? Yes, I do have more concerns in that regard. So that's kind of how I look at it, because I think that there are justifications for not being as good in some cases, but there are not justifications for not being as good in others.
Okay. I will say, I think it's pretty interesting that the Mets got to go home after London for 6 games, and the Phillies got to go to Boston and Baltimore. Now, I'm not going to start bitching about the schedule, because the Phillies were a huge beneficiary of a schedule early in the year, but you did touch on it. I mean, pretty rough travel situation there. A little bit surprised. Like, I'm almost surprised that the Players Association doesn't say, hey, if you're going to send a team to London, you're not going to send them on the road for a week following up from that.
Correct.
It's very strange that it played out that way. And I do think to some degree there probably was an impact. If you look at the totality of 6 games, did that have an impact on them? Probably a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, I do hear you on that. All right, let's talk a little bit about this part of it then. Rob Thompson, okay? Like, was Rob awake yesterday? I know he woke up late in the game. Again, a little role-playing here by me, but, like, it was cool to see him come out of the dugout finally after the Stubbs non-hit-by-pitch call, which I think, by the way, was correct, right?
Yeah.
But Rob obviously had some frustrations building throughout the course of the game. He comes out. You don't really see him get that hot usually, but where was he earlier in the game when Zach Wheeler was absolutely just getting pulverized and clearly didn't have it? You mentioned location was off. I know he was not helped by Mike Estabrook, who I made a joke at one point looked like he had a 30% same game parlay boost on the Orioles yesterday. That's probably not a great joke to make in light of some of the other news that's come out lately. But I mean, he was horrendous behind the plate, but Zach Wheeler was dying out there yesterday. Were you surprised? I was. I mean, honestly, now this is me being real. I was surprised Zach Wheeler was out there for as long as he was. I know he only threw 91 pitches, and I guess it's a big game, and it's Burns Wheeler, and like this guy beat him for the Cy Young 3 years years ago, so it means more, and he's a veteran, and you want to give him a chance to work through it. But like Zach Wheeler had nothing yesterday. Get him out of the game, man.
Yeah, I was a little perplexed. I think once they cut it to 4-2, I was thinking to myself, this would be a good time to, if he gives up like the first base runner, get him out, right? Like, okay, you kind of got yourself a little bit back into the game. Maybe this, but he didn't. And I agree with you. Like, I disagree with Rob. You should have had a better sense of where he was at that point in the game and say, you know what, doesn't have it today. Let's see if I can get the bullpen guys to get in here and we can claw our way back into this thing, because 4-2 was, you had a shot at that point, right? I mean, that was a good inning for the Phillies, and then it just freaking unravels from there. Much like the Nola start in Boston, right? It was a pretty similar situation there. And so, yeah, I do question Rob a little bit, especially since all the talk has been, well, as great as our starting pitching has been, we haven't really had a chance to use our bullpen guys. We got to get them more work. Well, here's a great opportunity to get your bullpen some work, and have a chance to maybe steal a series against a really good team. And you didn't. So I agree. I think Rob kind of was a little off his game as well in the series. And that, those are going to happen. Those things are going to happen from time to time. You're not always going to agree with the manager. So yeah, I'm with you on that, but I did like the nose to nose with Mike Estabrook, man. That was something. That was it's old. That was an old school manager getting tossed from a game kind of yelling match with an umpire, which you don't really see anymore. And I know that there's a take out there. I was sitting there watching it with Ant, and we were watching the game, and he hates umpires, so he can't stand them. He wants the robot umps. And he's like, why is this umpire inciting this? Why is he, going back at him? He should just sit there, take it for 30 seconds, and then move on. This makes it worse. And I said to him, that umpire's out there working in the heat himself too, right? Mm-hmm. And he's being told that he sucks at his job, and maybe he does.
He does.
But the reality of it is that imagine you're that guy. Sure. Imagine you're out there sweating your ass off, right? And and you have a difficult job. And being a home plate umpire is not easy. We all know this. And then someone's coming out and telling you that you can't see, that you suck, that you shouldn't be doing the job that you're doing. Are you just going to take it? Or are you going to give a little bit back? I think I would give a little bit back.
You know what I'm going to do as a human being with my temperament, my personality? Yeah. He comes out late in the game after all that. I say, hey, I'm sorry, buddy, that your team was 2 for fucking 14 with runners in scoring position today. Maybe you could have had your team up to play in this big game on Father's Day in front of a sold-out crowd, stadium takeover, all that. I'd say maybe you should worry about getting your team up to perform for a big game. That's what I would say. Now, I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm not even saying that is right. But that's what I would have said to him.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I agree. So, but it was good. It was good to see. And
I love it. I love Rob getting pumped up. I love Estabrook firing back at him. Now, I don't love the job that Estabrook did yesterday.
No, he was terrible.
I mean, you look at the first batter, the bottom of the first inning, you get Gunnar Henderson up there. He's one of the best players in the American League, period. Yeah. It's hard to get him out when you give him 3 strikes. You give him 4, and then that's what happens. Now, by no means am I saying that Mike Estabrook cost the Phillies the game yesterday. When you watch the game play out as it did, and like I just referenced, you go 2 for 14 with runners in scoring position. I know that there were numerous bad calls with the Phillies at the plate. Bryson Stott got one in a real bad spot. I believe Brandon Marsh had one on the outer half of the plate. That was called David Dahl. I get it. But it's just a tone setter, too. When you come out first batter, you strike him out in a nice battle, and then boom, home run. Sports, you have to be able to move on. You have to be able to just take the bumps as they come. But it was tone setting. It really was. And it's a shame that it played out that way. It's a shame that that's the job that the guy did behind the plate yesterday, because the matchup between the teams and the pitching matchup and what the game was kind of supposed to represent, it deserved more than what it got from the umpiring behind the plate yesterday. And that is, to me, disappointing. That being said, to kind of draw back to the bigger point, I don't think you can be mad at the Phillies. I don't think you can say that this team's a bunch of frauds. I don't believe that. But what I will say is that if you sat down yesterday with your father, if you're lucky enough to be with him, or your son, or if whoever you are listening to this, and or you're just a baseball fan, period, and you go, it's Father's Day, and it's a beautiful day in Baltimore, and you have this great Orioles team and this great Phillies team, and we have two great pitchers going head-to-head. I can't wait to lock in for the next 3 hours and sweat out a baseball game. And then you get that. Like, it's a total waste of time. It was a total waste of time yesterday. And that I do think is disappointing. You know, I get it. I get the travel. I get that you're going to go through ebbs and flows of the season. It's only one game. It's the middle of June. It doesn't have anything to do with October. I get it, all of that. But man, that was disappointing yesterday. It was.
Yeah, again, and I feel like I've said this a lot, but be upset in the moment. You should be. Like, you want to see a great game, you know? People who went down there, and by the way, Phillies fans were unbelievable all weekend in Baltimore to show up like they did, because that Orioles team averages, I think, 27,000 attendance per game, and they sold out 3 games in a stadium that holds 46,000. So
I'm not going to do this thing where I'm like, you know, other fan bases aren't the Philly, but like, I'm surprised that when I saw saw their attendance this year, that team with all that young homegrown talent, I cannot believe in that park. Like, I can't believe that those were the only 4 sellouts they've had all year. Those 3 games this weekend, and then opening day.
That's it. Yep. It's crazy. It's crazy. But so credit to the Phillies fans. But when you look at it, like, I just for kicks was like looking on the secondary market at the prices for tickets for those games down there. And they were selling for, and I'm talking the cheap seats were $165. If you wanted to sit, you know, in a good seat downstairs, you're looking $400 a ticket, right? And so you're going to take your family and get together and go travel down to Baltimore and spend that kind of money to go watch a baseball game. Yeah, you're going to be pissed off at that result yesterday. You just are, because you forked over a good chunk of change to go watch a game that really disappointed you.
Yeah,
ultimately, right? So I get the fan base being mad in the moment. I certainly do. But I feel like, Bob, we gotta, I gotta be in the 2022 mode this weekend, or to this morning, like after this weekend, because I feel like that was the year that I kept being the guy to say, it's okay. Think about the long term. Don't think about the short term. And I feel like that's where we have to be right now. And, you know, you can't forget what the great start they had. You also can't forget that they've had some struggles here. But on the whole, you still got to remember where this team is headed and what it's going to be. And look, to me, having some struggles like this maybe shows you a little bit more what your weaknesses are. And if you are the executives of this team, Dave Dombrowski and Sam Fuld is the general manager, and you're approaching the deadline, which is now, I believe, 45 days away or 46 days away, and you're looking at it, maybe you sit there and go, okay, we probably weren't thinking to fix that spot beforehand, but now you see how we look against these really good teams. Maybe we need to fix that. And so, like, I think it could be an eye-opener for management, not necessarily for fans, but I think it's an eye-opener for management to say, hey, we need to rectify that if we're going to make that next step and win this championship this year. So I think it's good in a way.
Funny you say that, because one of the things I wanted to get to was this idea that, yes, the Phillies are very good. And yes, I don't think there's any reason to absolutely be slamming the panic button or sitting here saying these guys are frauds or any of that stuff. But just going to go back now to May 24th. And they are, as a team, 22nd in OPS. They are 21st in batting average. They are 20th in on-base percentage, and they are 20th in slugging percentage. And we can talk about runs per game. And if you look at it and you go all the way back to the beginning of March, or at the end of March, you can say, oh, look, they're one of the best run-producing teams in the National League. You can't argue with that. But we have seen here lately that this offense has kind of gone more into that inconsistent mode where they're leaving guys on base. They're not scoring a ton now. Certain guys just really have not been able to get it going. And it will draw back to what we talked about on Friday, because I know if you listen to Friday's show, I sat here and talked about Alec Bohm for 20 minutes. And then he goes out, and I believe he was 8 for 13 this weekend with 3 doubles. He helps them win the game on Friday night. He had a fantastic weekend. And I want to, give him his flowers here today, because I was not overly flattering towards him on Friday. But, he wraps up the Red Sox series at 286, 797 OPS. Over the weekend, he jumped his OPS by 33 percentage points, and he raised his batting average from 286 to 302. Like, that's not terribly easy to do in the middle of June. Like, you have to have a really good 3-game run to get that type of increase. And he had one. And it was a credit to him, because like I talked about late last week, I mean, the 35 games or so prior to this weekend, he was dreadful. I mean, he hit 221. His OPS was under 600. No power whatsoever. I mean, still, even now, only has 2 home runs in his last 41 games. But hey, you lead the league in doubles. There's something to be said for that. He's on pace to knock in 130 runs. Like, he had a very good weekend. They're going to need more of that. But my reaction to what Alec Bohm did this weekend was not so much, see, that's why he's a hell of a cleanup hitter. That's why he should be behind Bryce Harper. My thought is, oh my God, let this guy hit second. Like, even with Trey Turner coming back, I'm like, let Alec Bohm hit second then. Like I actually have reached the point, and I'm not a big lineup guy. Reconfigure the lineup. Either let Bohm hit second or drop him down 5-6. Like that's where I'm at. And what does that mean? Then who's hitting fourth? The guy that you don't have on your roster right now.
Correct.
My take has not changed at all. Yes, was very critical of Alec Bohm. Yes, nice weekend. Yes, I'd like to see you be a little bit more consistent moving forward. You need another dude in this lineup. And I know that you're getting Real Muto back. I know that Turner comes back today, but you need another dude. And I am absolutely convinced of that, even more so by what I saw this weekend.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Bob. And, they're not going to touch the top of the lineup, right? I mean, it's going to be Schwarber, Turner,
I'm
Harper.
all right with that.
Great,
I'm okay with
right?
that.
It's what it's going to be. But if you get another bat that can hit 4, right? And now all of a sudden you can start going, all right, let's put Bohm 5, and Real Muto comes back. He can hit 6. Right now, all of a sudden, the lineup's starting to get really long, and even guys who are struggling, like guys we're going to talk about today, Bryson Stott, Nick Castellanos. But if you're batting those guys 7 and 8 in your lineup, like, are you as upset with them struggling like they are if they're batting in the bottom third of your lineup, right? Knowing that they have a little bit of a track record of being able to come through in bigger moments. I'm not. I think they are one bat away from being damn good with the lineup and not inconsistent. And again, that kind of falls into, because like you look right now, who's hitting right now? Well, Bohm had a good weekend. Schwarber's been good for the past week, right? Harper's okay. He's not
okay. He was 3 for 12 with 1 extra base hit this weekend.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to kill him for that, but he did not have an impact weekend.
No, he didn't have an impact weekend, but he's been okay. But other than that, I mean, who's really hitting? Like, nobody. So you start adding pieces back in. Now, I'm not saying Trey Turner is going to start hitting 343 again after missing 38 games, but you got to think Trey Turner is going to be Trey Turner, right? Now you kind of get him back going again. Maybe if one other guy gets going, now more than half your lineup is hitting, right? So it could just be that quick that it turns back in the other direction. So I'm not ready to just be like, oh my God, this offense is so inconsistent. I think it was inconsistent for this last 10 games. Yeah, for sure. And you want to go back to the 24th of May. That's fine. You want to look at that. That's fine. That's good. I think that it's going to come back around again.
Yeah, but the 24th of May, by the way, was that weekend where they left and went out to Colorado. That's kind of like where you started to feel like, all right, not great, guys. I mean, I know they swept the Brewers, who are a very good team at home, but that was
they didn't hit
byproduct of offensive production in any way, shape, or form. So, that's kind of the date that I've circled. I don't know what it looks like. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't even know if you go back another week, if it helps or hurts. I'm not sure. I just circled that date because that's where they went out there.
And I think that's the one that made sense, because that's when the offense started to kind of, have some hiccups. Was when they went out on that trip. I think that's a fair date to look at, right? So yeah, I mean, that's how I look. I think that's the beauty of baseball, right? Sometimes we can look at this like this, over a span of time, but one player suddenly changing how they're playing in one direction can make a team go way up or make a team go way down if they trend the other direction, right? So it's so fascinating how that works. But I think that you're right. The overall story here is the Phillies need a cleanup hitter.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Alec Bohm, because I think Alec Bohm is better services your lineup elsewhere with the way he's hitting.
Well, it worked well for Alec Bohm when we did the deep dive on him Friday. So let's see if we can put Bryson Stott on the hot seat and get a similar response.
I can't wait. You've had these stats like percolating for days.
It's been tough. Like I've slowly, how much I like Bryson Stott as a baseball player. Like I've always been, even you go back to 22 when he was really going through it. I said, I think this guy's different. Like I know he's struggling right now, but I just kind of have a belief that he's better than what you saw as a rookie, and he started to figure it out. And then last year was really good. And, he had a stretch here this season where you felt like, okay, like this is the guy that we kind of expected to see after a little bit of a rough start. And he has now been for basically 30 games, pretty dreadful. It's starting to kind of get ugly on him now. OPS is at 695 on the season. And just some things here in June. He is 9 for 46 in the month of June. He's walked 6 times, which like is okay, but like even the walk rate's starting to decline a little bit now. He's hitting 196 this month with a 571 OPS. You go back over the last 30 games, he's hitting 194 with a 583 OPS. He has not homered, Anthony, since May 18th. That was when they played the Nationals at home. It's been a month since he's hit a home run. I'm not saying the guy's a 30 homer guy, but like, come on, dude. Then you kind of go a little bit deeper into it and you start looking at some of the StatCast metrics. Average exit velocity is in the bottom 10% of the league. Bat speed, which is the new metric that they developed this season, he's in the bottom 4% of bat speed. His hard hit percentage is the bottom 10%. His contact profile has just kind of been pretty rough. And not that it was ever elite. Like if you go back to last year, it's like bottom 20, 25%. But I mean, he's really taken a step back in this regard now. And when you talk about the bat speed metric, like you go, oh, come on, dude, like who gives a shit? I will just say, like, the eye test, like, you go, man, it looks like his bat is slow right now. Like, everything just feels like it's dragging through the zone. He's not hitting the ball hard to the pull side whatsoever. A lot of those dinks and dunks, like, out to center and left center field that he got a year ago, they just are, like, lazy fly balls and, like, weak ground balls this year. It does not look good right now. And I'm not saying that my faith in him as a player is wavering, but, like, if we're going to sit here and talk about Nick Castellanos or Alec Bohm's last 35 games or what's up with Kyle Schwarber's power or all the other things that we've talked about this year, Bryson Stott's sort of been immune to the conversation, and it's probably about time for that to change.
It's fair. And the one thing I will say is that I think when you look at the fact that he kind of changed the approach a little bit to be more selective, right? I mean, you go from in 2023 being in the 19th percentile in walk rate to this year being in the 91st percentile in walk rate. That is a massive change, right? That's not like just, a slight improvement. That's a massive change. And I think when you do that there's going to be an adjustment period. And when you say, I don't want to make it sound like, you should adjust in 60 games. That should be plenty of time. But you've changed everything you've done as a hitter in the way you're approaching it. And it's a matter of figuring it out, right? Okay, I'm now looking at more pitches, but maybe I'm not getting that contact rate that I used to get before. What do I need to change there? Like it's a constant game that that you're trying. That's a puzzle that you're trying to figure out. And so you look at I looked at when you sent over some of the StatCast stuff yesterday, and we were looking at it and saying, well, yeah, but his expected batting average is still in the 53rd percentile. His ex-WOBA's in the 58th percentile. These aren't numbers that are going to be like, oh my God, that's fantastic.
The expected weighted on base average.
Yeah, right.
My dad can really sink his teeth into.
Oh, I know. And but the reality of it is that those are numbers that, the expected batting average is down slightly, but the expected weighted on base average is up. So you look at it and go, okay, like there's something still there. And I think that's why you're still confident that he'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in the moment, you're right. Like to this point, of the season through the first 2.5 months, he hasn't been as consistent or as productive as he needs to be. He can be better than what he's been. But I think if we're looking for reasons as to why he's struggling, I think that there are things there with how he's changed the approach that he's had at the plate this year to not be as much of a chaser, to get behind 0-2 in every at bat, and fouling off 120 pitches, like all that stuff. I think that this is it's a chemistry experiment, and they're going to finally get to it. They have a hypothesis, and they think at the end it's going to end up being more productive. When that comes, though, will be a time will tell kind of situation.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'll go there and just kind of put it out there anyway. We've seen that Rob Thompson does not shy away from platoons, certainly in the outfield, and that's probably a product of the fact that they just don't really have guys that warrant playing every day, and we've covered that extensively on this show. And I actually do think that spans right field now, which we can get to in a moment. Bryson Stott this season, his left-right splits really aren't drastically different. Like he's actually hitting better for average against lefties. Now, certainly he's only had 61 at bats against left-handers versus 157 against right-handers, but he is hitting 246 against lefties versus 229 against right-handed pitching, which is really, to me, the surprise, quite honestly. But the OPS is similar, 680 against lefties, 702 against righties. So it's not like you're getting a huge drop-off against left-handers. But one of the conversations that we've sort of been having here with Trey Turner returning is, well, what do you do with Edmundo Sosa? He's been pretty good. And we've all talked about the overexposure, and he's struggled a little bit lately, but certainly he's done a good enough job where he should be playing more than once a week. So how do you handle that? I'm not there, but I will ask you, would there be a point where you say, all right, I've sort of identified Bryson Stott as this core guy who I think is a big part of what we're doing, but there does come a time where production is production and we're not getting enough of it. And if we don't get more of it, we might need to consider a way to, I guess, aid that lack of production. So Edmundo Sosa goes back to the bench, and against left-handed pitching this year, Edmundo Sosa is hitting 333 with a 1.127 OPS. Like, do you reach a point where you say, like, maybe it's not a pure platoon, but Edmundo Sosa starts to take some of Bryson Stott's at bats?
I think you're going to see Sosa get some chances against lefties there. I just don't think it's going to be all the lefties. I don't think you're going to get to a platoon type situation. I think that he'll get a few chances. But I think the Phillies also recognize that what they got out of Sosa for a month was far more than they ever could have expected.
Sure.
And that the reality of it is that he's not that guy. I mean, if you look at the last 2 weeks, he's hitting 200, I think, in the last 2 weeks with a 231 on base percentage and 320 slugging. I mean, it's not, even though he hit the home run Friday, I mean, he's not been as good. And it was funny, like we're watching the game yesterday and I'm sitting there with Anthony and I'm like, watch this, but he takes the first pitch strike, right? And I said, watch what happens here. They're going to pound him in with fastballs. And then once they get strike two, they're going to throw him a slider that he can't lay off of. And they did it to him 2 more times. They did it to the end of the game too. Got him the same way at the end of the game. Like they have a book on it now. They know you pound them in with the fastballs and then get him to chase. That's how you beat Edmundo Sosa. So, okay. So we've now realized that he's got to kind of take a breather a little bit and not be an everyday guy. That's okay. It's fine. He's been more than anything you could ask for the Phillies. And he'll get his chances. He'll get his opportunity to play. I don't think he should be playing ahead of Bryson Stott with any kind of regularity other than maybe Stott needs a day off.
So we've talked a lot about where guys hit in this lineup. We just talked about Alec Bohm. Maybe in an ideal world, he's more of a two-hitter. I know Turner's back now. Maybe you slip him down 5-6, plays a little bit better. Great. Let me give you this one. Bryson Stott's had 218 at bats this season. 118 of those at bats have come in the number 5 or number 6 spot in this order. He has more at bats in the 5 spot this season than any other spot in the lineup.
Yeah.
Is there anything about Bryson Stott's game right now that screams number 5 hitter in a lineup? I mean,
no, not
362 slugging percentage, 5 home runs. I just mentioned he hasn't hit a home run in a calendar month. He's only got 9 doubles. I mean, this is a big part of this. Like, yes, Bryson Stott has to be better, but when you talk about some of the deficiencies of the lineup and the way that this thing has been constructed now, with Real Muto out, with Turner having been out, with Marsh having been out for those 2 weeks, like, the lineup was such that you're asking Bryson Stott to take all of these at-bats in the middle of the order. And not only is he struggling, but he's struggling in key spots. I mean, Bryson Stott is not a number 5, number 6 hitter in any lineup.
No.
It's certainly not right now.
No.
And that has been, I think, a big part of what you're seeing here. Like, I mean, you're getting a guy who's really going through it, and you're hitting him in the heart of your lineup.
Yeah, and that's part of the issue too, Bob. And, you know, I wonder if against right-handed pitching, if they'll think about flipping him in Marsh. Marsh is not great, but he's good against righties. I mean, he's good against right-handed batters, right? Right-handed pitchers. So I wonder if you think about flipping the two of them. Because ultimately, let's think about it. With Turner coming back, right, you're going to have to drop people down. Are you going to keep Stott in that 5 spot there? Or are you going to maybe think about go Marsh there?
Yeah, I mean, look, Bryson Stott is slugging 376 against right-handed pitching this season. Brandon Marsh is slugging 481 against right-handed pitching. I mean, that's your argument right there.
Yeah, I think to me, I would consider, not that I think Marsh is a 5 hitter either.
No.
I mean, ultimately, I don't. But I mean, if you're looking to keep this left-right balance thing going, right? Until you get another bat in the middle of this lineup, I would flip them and just drop Stott down. And it's, again, like I said, it doesn't hurt you to have him at the bottom of your lineup. Like, that's a good person to have hitting 7th or 8th or whatever. Like, I mean, he's a good hitter for that spot in the lineup, even with the struggles he's had this year.
Now, listen, we have another 5 weeks or so to go here. But while we're talking about this add another bat to the lineup thing, obviously one of the issues, or one of the things that you're going to have to take into consideration, is how many teams are going to be willing to part with those impact bats. And the American League is starting to get some separation. Like, you have the Yankees, Guardians, Mariners winning their respective divisions. And then you have the Orioles, the Royals, and the Twins fairly locked into those wild card spots. You still have the Red Sox lingering around a little bit. Maybe the Blue Jays can make some noise. Do the Rangers get off the mat? Maybe the Astros, who are 7 games out of a playoff spot right now, catch fire. I don't know. But like, the American League kind of looks like there's 7, maybe 8 teams for 6 spots. The National League is a disaster right now. I mean, like, it's comical. The Padres, who are coming in here after having been swept by the Mets at 37 and 38, hold the final wild card spot right now. Like, if you go and look at the NL wild card standings, the Nationals are actually tied percentage-wise with the Padres for the final wild card spot. The Diamondbacks, who've stunk, are a half game out. The Giants, 2 games under, a half game out. The Reds are back in it now, a game out. The Pirates are a game out. The Cubs are a game and a half. The Mets are a game and a half. The New York Mets, fresh off of 6 out of the last 7, are now only a game and a half out of a playoff spot. The only 2 teams in the National League that have no shot are the Rockies and Marlins. So if you're going to have this many teams in it, maybe not all of them will be buyers, but there could be a lot of stand pat candidates here. And yeah, maybe the White Sox, they unload Lou Rob, but there's going to be 4 or 5 teams in the bidding war for that. Do the Astros make a decision? You know, Tucker gets healthy. Do they make that move? I don't know. But there aren't going to be a ton of teams out here, it feels like right now, that are going to be in straight sell mode. So, you know, we're starting to see the AL form. You kind of need somebody in the NL to like start playing some better baseball and maybe phase some of these like middling teams out of the picture a little bit.
Yeah, I
agree. Mets are a game and a half out of a playoff spot right now. I was like, oh, look at that. Like, a season-saving game for the Mets in London. And like, lo and behold, 5 out of, I mean, sweeping the Padres. The Padres are not a great team. We know this. But you like swept the Padres. That's pretty good. They're starting to hit a little bit all of a sudden.
We'll see.
I mean, I'm not a believer. I'm not a believer by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it might be the worst possible thing for that franchise moving forward is if they catch fire for the next 5 weeks, convince themselves that they can make a run, fall apart at the end of the season, didn't move any of their aging, overpriced veteran pieces where they could have gotten a return, and then they're even more boned going into 25. Like, that would actually be perfect Mets.
Yeah. I think they got a little bit of a tough stretch coming up. I mean, they go to Texas for 3, and then
Texas stinks. I watched a lot of Rangers Mariners this weekend.
Yeah.
Just let you know where I'm at in my life right now. But oh my God, Texas.
They don't have the pitching right now. Yeah. And they got some injuries too. But I don't know. I think that could be a tough matchup. Then they got a Wrigley. Then they got 2 with the Yankees and then 3 with the Astros before going on a 7-game road trip to Washington and Pittsburgh.
No, I love Washington. I think I'm in on the Nationals to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, so I am too.
I think I'm there. I actually still like the Reds too. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
prediction looked horrible for a little bit, but I kind of think that they figure it out.
Yeah.
I actually say that right now I'll say the Braves just based on record, Nationals and Reds are going to be my 3 wild cards.
It's a total, you throw it to a wall and see what sticks every week.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you don't know from one week to the next. It's craziness.
I want to get a higher production value to this podcast, and I need to have like a sound drop for like the Nick Castellanos segment. Dun, dun, dun. Nick Castellanos. Nick Castellanos was 0 for 14 with 6 strikeouts this weekend.
Yeah, he was bad.
He was dreadful.
Yeah.
And I showed you the message.
Yeah.
I was like, Anthony has a soft spot for Nick Castellanos. And I try to be fair on this show. But like, he stinks right now. And like, we keep doing this thing. Well, if you go back to May 1st, he looks a lot better and it's not as bad. And that's true. Like, the first 30 games of the season buried him statistically. So when you look at the overall picture, it's worse than it's been for the last month and a half. I get all that. I do. I understand it. But like, come on, man. We're almost 80 games into this thing. We're almost at the midway point of this season. I don't know what actually are they at 71. Where are they at 71 games?
Yeah,
71 games in, and like 0 for 14. Like, those at bats were horrible this weekend.
Yeah, that hurts.
Like, what do you do about? Like, I don't have anything else to say. Like, I get it. Like, he's been a little bit better. He's had some moments. Like, he's a good guy. Like, I think one of the misconceptions. Like, here's the bone I will throw. To the Nick Castellanos defenders, whoever's left, is that like I think is a good guy. Like, there are a lot of people that will send me a text message and are like, yo, what's the deal with him? Like, does he give a shit? Like, because when you watch him on TV sometimes, like, you just kind of like feel like, oh, like, is this guy really invested? Is he really locked in? Like, yeah, he is. Like, I think he's a really good teammate. I think he desperately wants to win. I think that he, to a significant degree, is maybe, I don't want to say embarrassed, but probably feels like I'm not doing my job. I want to be better for this team. I think from a personality standpoint, it's all there. I do.
Yeah, and he's a guy who works, because I don't think anybody realizes how much this guy actually puts in. He might have that Joe Cool kind of persona, like outward persona. Like I was the last homestand when they were playing Milwaukee. I'm walking in there one day, and I got there a little bit early, and Castellanos is out on the field taking extra BP by himself with Kevin Long, and it's like, it was, I don't know, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right before a 7 o'clock game. It was just him. And so, like, the notion that, he's more lackadaisical about this is complete nonsense. Like, he actually is a guy who cares. And that's why I think that I probably am a little bit more sympathetic to him and try to believe, because look, the guy does have a track record of being a really good hitter. And so therefore you have to, when you see that the guy's putting the work in, you have to believe that it's going to, result in something. It's going to have some kind of fruitful outcome at some point. But I like to look at things in 100 plate appearances at a time. And, I've been I had been preaching that he had been, look, if you just look at it, go back to May 1st. I'm one of those guys. I've been saying it. It's been coming. But now you look at the last 100 plate appearances, and 15 this weekend have to be included in that, right? You can't just say, well, let's ignore those. They happened. They're part of it. And it's not good, Bob. This last 100 is 222 batting average, 260 on base, 704 OPS. It's just not good enough. It just isn't. And I don't
you probably live with that a little bit more. Like, just go through the Bohm conversation that we had. You could take 100 bats and be like, oh, what the hell? But at least it was coming off such a high that you go, because this has been the thing with Castellanos historically. Maybe he's not a game-to-game model of consistency, but you take the highs with the lows and you go, okay, like pretty good hitter here, but you're not getting that spike to kind of want to stomach this.
Yeah, it's rough. I know a lot of people think he's going to be out of the lineup tonight. I do not. I think that with Turner coming back into the lineup tonight, I think that they're going to say, let's see what this lineup looks like for a few games with Trey.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I'm not. I guess I'm not calling for him to sit for 5 games. Like I'm not even there, but I'm just like, man, like the reality of this is that, and I've said it before, I'm like, I had the definitive Nick Castellanos take, and because the roster is the roster, I'm sticking to this. He still represents more upside than anything else that they can put out in right field on a semi-consistent basis. And therefore you have to continue to ride this out. Now at the same time, or in the same breath, like, if you add to this mix and you change the dynamics of your roster, I may feel differently.
Right.
But I still think as much as I'm like, I willingly acknowledge that this is bad, I still think you have to run him out there every game and just hope that he gives you one of those stretches that we've seen as recently as last season. And I'll be honest with you, I'm becoming more and more pessimistic about it, but I still think you have to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's the way it is. I do think that they are getting closer to giving him the day off that seemed to work for Alec Bohm, right? I mean, I think that day is getting closer to coming, but I don't think it's going to be tonight. I think there's a chance that it's Wednesday because it give him 2 days off in a row. Could be Friday, the other side of the off day. Maybe they give him the series against the Padres, and if it doesn't get any better, then okay, you're off Thursday and you're out of the lineup Friday. I think that's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to be tonight. I think they want to see what this lineup looks like with Trey back in there.
Yeah, I mean you sift through all the Fangraphs numbers and everything, and like, the hard hit percentage is a little lower this year, 43 to 39%, and the one thing that really is interesting, batting average of balls in play last season was 337. Even if you go back to 22 where he wasn't good, it was 326. It's 236 this season.
Yeah.
Like when he puts the ball in play, there are often, and I think that this is part of the frustration. It's not like, oh, he was 0 for 4, but man, like a couple screamers, some bad luck. Like you kind of just feel like, man, like 4-hopper to short.
Yep.
Striking out 40% of his at-bats this weekend. Like, oh, come on. Like, and I mean, I get it. I just don't know what you do about it over the next 5-6 weeks, but it's a problem. I mean, it's a real thing, especially this lineup that they had to try out here this past week where you're hitting the guy second. I mean, but again, you don't have Bryson Stott swinging the bat well. You can't, I mean, and I know you have the lefty situation, so you have to hit a right-hander at 2. Like it's just, it's not hard to figure out when I say go back to May 24th and look at some of their offensive struggles. It is not hard to see why. I mean, that's for damn sure. I wanted to get to one more thing before we get to one more thing. I sent you this message yesterday. And let me stall as I'm bringing this up here. I'm going to Tim Kelly at Phillies Nation, his Twitter feed, and I'm pulling up a story that he wrote yesterday, and it kind of struck me. So let me see. Rob Thompson had some interesting quotes, and says they feel good about where he's ahead of his return, or where he's at ahead of his return. Thompson says, I do. And it's taken longer because I think it would have been shorter if he had gone on a rehab stint, but it is what it is. But I do feel good about it. We hit him pretty hard. And then Tim asks, why would Turner's recovery been shorter if he went on a rehab stint? Well, he probably would have been playing quicker, Thompson said. And because of the fact that you're not being tested in a game, we have to do more things here and more days here to get that done. Goes on to talk about why, and I guess Rob had explained why some players have become more reluctant to do the rehab assignments. And Rob cites travel. When stars go down, there are things, and I'm quoting him directly here again, things that they are asked to do, sign autographs. People have better access to the players in the minor leagues. So I think it can be bothersome at times. Man, I got to tell you, players have the right to refuse rehab stints, and Trey Turner is certainly not alone in this regard. But it's interesting. Rob is super protective of his players. He will always have his players' backs. I do not think that Rob's comments yesterday were meant to be inflammatory by any stretch of the imagination. I think he was just telling the truth. But I will say, and I know you feel differently about this, but I will say this. Right now in this city, when you turn on sports talk radio, the number one topic of conversation is the way that Jalen Hurts answered a question, what seemed like kind of a throwaway question about Nick Sirianni during mini camps. And it was to the effect of, hey, Kellen Moore is here now. What does it say about Nick that they're willing to switch things up? And Jalen Hurts could not give the answer that everyone wanted to hear, which is like, yeah, I love Nick. He's a great coach. I'm really bought in on 24. We're going to go win a Super Bowl. There was no glowing endorsement. And everyone's like, well, are Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts on the same page? And we're dissecting this week after week after week. And we're going to do it here all the way up until training camp when they put Jalen Hurts on a podium again to answer this question and see what he does with it. Meanwhile, we just had the manager of a team say, yeah, our $30 million a year guy probably would have been back sooner if he would have been willing to accept a rehab assignment. I don't know, man. World Series team, big expectations, $300 million contract. He would have been back sooner if he would have done a rehab stint. We're not even batting an eyelash at that. I don't know. Is that just a Phillies Eagles thing or what? I'm not saying Trey Turner should have done it. I'm not saying that he's being a brat. I'm not saying any of those things, but man, when I read those quotes, I was like, well, that's interesting.
It's interesting in this regard to me, Bob, because as someone who's been around for many years, I can tell you that this isn't anything new. This happens all the time in every sport, not just baseball. Players dictate their own health and their own recovery. And they do it their own way, and that's just the way it's going to be. And everything is always going to be that way. It's just the way it is. But I think that we are in a time period where this is more of maybe the manager's being a little bit more transparent than maybe teams usually are when talking about injury recoveries for players. And so therefore it seems like it should be a bigger story. I don't begrudge your take on it. And
let me just reframe it this way. AJ Brown just signed a 3-year extension worth as much as $96 million. If in week 3, AJ Brown pulls a hamstring, and before a game in week 6, Nick Sirianni came out and said, well, listen, there was an option available to AJ Brown to do something. He elected not to do it. Had he elected to do it, he might be playing this week. How would that go over?
Yeah, again, because it's the football mentality is different than every other sport. And we fans in general have that mentality for every sport. This has been the thing I've been railing against for forever. But I personally can't get all fired up about this just because I know how many.
I do too. I mean, it's not like I'm saying this and you're telling me something I don't know. I know the players dictate their own health, their own recovery. I have no problem that it took Trey Turner, however many days it was, or games, 38 games. Is that what you said earlier?
He missed 38 games total.
Okay, great. That's no problem. This team's trying to win a World Series. It's June 17th.
Yeah. I guess if you want to be a Turner defender in this case, you could sit there and say, what big, in the grand scheme of things, if Trey Turner comes back 3 days sooner, how different is the outcome?
Maybe they win 2 out of 3 against the Orioles, and we're talking about was a nice weekend.
Maybe.
Maybe.
And what does and
I
what is
mean, I just watched a guy go 0 for 14 in the 2-hole this weekend. Maybe that would have had an impact. I don't know.
And if it does, if that is the case, and if they win one more game in the regular season, what's that impact going to be at the end of the year?
I don't know. I guess we'll see at the end of the year. No, I mean, look, I get it. Like I said, I totally understand it. It's really interesting to me that Rob Thompson was like, look, this guy didn't go on a rehab assignment. Yeah. Why not? Well, it's kind of just what it is today. And, they have to sign autographs, and it's kind of really paraphrased. It's like, well, these guys, these big stars don't want to go do it because A, they're kind of above the travel, and B, they don't want to go down there and sign autographs and be accessible to fans. Like, wow. Okay. Like, yeah, I know that's the sport. I know that like Trey Turner and the Players Association, like they all have the right to refuse these assignments. Like, no problem. But man, like it just to me was like, okay. And that's all. And I just think it's really an interesting conversation. I personally do. Maybe people listening to this don't think it is, but I do think it's an interesting conversation when you put it up against like what is going on with the Eagles right now, where like, I personally didn't even think those comments were that big of a deal by Jalen Hurts. But man, like we are dissecting the shit out of it. And then you have this baseball team with its manager saying like, yeah, you could have been back a little bit sooner.
Yeah, but that's all right. That's a fan mentality.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Today, Trey Turner is expected to return to the lineup. It's decision day for the Philadelphia Phillies. Christian Pache, Johan Rojas, David Dahl. Which one of these 3 guys is not in uniform for the Phillies tonight?
Johan Rojas. And I kind of changed my tune a little bit on this. So not that I think that this is the wrong move. I think that this is what the Phillies should do, and it's the right move. But on Friday, we were talking about it, and I was saying that, I watched this team, and I think Rojas should be the one going down, but I thought the Phillies might consider DFAing Pache, because they've been so glowing in their defense of Rojas all season. But then over the weekend, things kind of got a little bit different. Like we talked about on Friday, the interview Matt Gelb did at The Athletic with Dave Dombrowski, and Dombrowski's comments weren't exactly heaping praise on Rojas. Then you had Rojas get on Friday night get thrown out at home plate on a play, on a single when he was pinch running at second base. And Rob Thompson, after the game, says he's got to score there, that his secondary lead wasn't good enough, and he talked to him about it right away. And you can't worry about getting picked off because he leads the team and getting picked off on base, right? So, like, I mean, that's something that's there. So it's a lack of baseball sense in a term there. And I think that there are things that are starting to come out a little bit. They're not happy with his defense as they thought they would be. His profile as a hitter is while his production is about what they expected, the underlying metrics, if you want to talk about looking at some StatCast stuff that's just outrageous right now with Johan Rojas, like he's the bottom 1% in exit velocity. He's the bottom 3% in baseball in walk rate. He's the bottom 9% in barrels. Bottom 11% in hard hit percentage, and then I was singing the praises of Bryson Stott's ex-Woba. Rojas is bottom 8% in the league, and that's terrible. It's like he's pretty poor all around, and he gets lucky sometimes. And they wanted him to be a bunter, Bob. If you remember spring training,
yeah, that hasn't worked out.
Go back to our conversations when I was down in Clearwater. And I'm talking about every game he's bunting, at least once, sometimes twice. Like they wanted him to bunt for hits and use his speed. He hasn't bunted for a hit since April 13th. Like,
well, let me give you one here as well. And I know that we're not using Johan Rojas for his power potential, but do you know the last time Johan Rojas had an extra base hit?
It's been a while. We were laughing about this on Friday. Right? I think he had 6 total.
He has 6 total. He hasn't had an extra base hit since May 10th.
Yeah.
I mean, so his last 26 games, no doubles, no triples, no homers. If you go back to May 3rd, his first game that he's played, the first game he played during the month of May, So since May 3rd, all of May, all of June to date, 32 games, 29 starts. He's hitting 230, which, like, okay, all right, like 230 is what he's got to hit, right? He's got a 505 OPS. He's walked one time in his last 32 games. He's walked one time in his last 105 plate appearances, Anthony. Like, you would think by accident a pitcher at some point might just lose control and throw 4 balls before they throw 3 strikes and put this guy on base via walk. And it's happened once in 105 plate appearances. He has not hit a double or a triple in that time span. He has 1 home run. I mean, like, I'm sorry. Like, that is the correct move. It is the correct move because he's not good enough right now. And it is the correct move because you want to maintain the flexibility and the optionality of having all of these players available to you. They are not good enough in the outfield to cut ties with any of their options right now. They're just not.
And look, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's nothing thrilling about 2 platoons in the outfield. I mean, don't get me, the 93 Phillies did it, right? And they went to the World Series, but you don't really want to have 2 platoons. And in essence, that's what they're going to do right now is they're going to give it a run for the next 5 to 6 weeks with Brandon Marsh and Christian Pache platooning center field and David Dahl and Whit Merrifield platooning left field. And you'll have Dahl and Marsh start against lefties, and Pache will be your defensive replacement. They'll slide Marsh over to left and put Pache into center, and pull Dahl out. And Merrifield and Pache will start against righties, and I guess Marsh will be the defensive replacement for Merrifield. So they have that a little bit of flexibility there. It's okay. It's not great.
Yeah, and look, I mean, David Dahl, who was great in spring training, did a great job at Lehigh, was really good those first few games. He came up with the Phillies, hits the big home run in London. That was a cool moment. This week, he had an opportunity to get a little extended run. And, I mean, like, look, 2 for 20, dating back to the beginning of the Boston series, 1 extra base hit. They're going to need more out of him as well. And, I mean, look, it's David Dahl. I'm not saying he's going to come in and hit 400 for you all season, but if he's going to have an existence on this roster, he's only going to get a limited amount of run to prove that he really belongs up here over the course of time. I don't know what the deal is with Cody Clemens. Maybe today you guys will find out a little bit more about that. I would assume that Clemens just goes back down when he's healthy, but like, I would love to see David Dahl stick and kind of be what they wanted Jake Cave to actually be. Like, that would be cool, but I don't know for sure that he's going to be able to do that. And certainly he's not a very good defender. So he's going to have to hit to stay up here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's let's see where you're at. The one luxury that Dave Dombrowski has with the Phillies getting off to the start that they've gotten off to is they can make it to the deadline with what they have and not have, it's like, it's not like they're in a situation where it's like, man, we got to go get that guy now. We need that player now. Like, they can survive the next 6 weeks with what they have. And then you wait and see who falls out of the race, and maybe another name comes up that, we talk about, Luis Robert, there's other names that have come up, but maybe there's a name that we're not even thinking about or not even discussing because you don't think that team's going to sell. And all of a sudden they have a bad run and say, you know what, we're going to sell and we're going to trade this guy, and be like, oh, I wasn't thinking about him 6 weeks ago. Right. And so Dave Dombrowski has that luxury to wait. And so you got to give these guys a run at it, see what 6 weeks brings with these guys. And who knows? Maybe it turns out to be the best thing ever. I mean, like I said, it worked in 93. I mean, you don't expect it to, but I mean, if you remember back to that 93 team, Eisenreich and Thompson played against righties, and it was Wes Chamberlain and Pete Incaviglia who played against lefties. All right. And it worked. But I mean, I don't think these guys are those guys, but you never know, and give it a run.
I'll tell you what, I was sort of sad to see the Red Sox have a decent week because I would love to see them fall out of contention and consider trading Tyler O'Neill.
Although I do wonder if he's a product of that ballpark a little bit. Maybe.
But relatively cheap, unrestricted free agent after this season has been productive. I mean, he certainly has been productive for them. He's OPSing in the mid 800s. He's been pretty good lately. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Well, look, let's get to one last thing and shut it down.
Well, one last thing has to be the Dodgers right now, man. Back-to-back days.
Yeah.
Yamamoto gets pulled from a game with triceps
Forearms, I think. Yeah,
tightness,
forearms,
and
triceps.
then the next night, Mookie Betts gets beamed by a 98-mile-per-hour fastball on his wrist, fractures his wrist. They say it won't need surgery, but that's not a quick recovery. We saw that with Bryce Harper with his thumb, kind of, same area. I mean, it's, wrist is a little bit different, but it's still, I'll tell you, as someone who has fractured their wrist before, there's a big thing with grip strength, right? So when you're talking about holding the bat, what that's going to be like. I wonder how long he's going to miss. I got to assume it's at least 6 weeks, if not 8. How does this impact the Dodgers?
They, like the Phillies, are a little bit fortunate in that they have a pretty sizable lead. They have an 8-game lead in the NL West right now, and at least with the Phillies, you have the Braves, who could theoretically get hot and have the pedigree to make a run. The NL West does not really feature a team that makes you say, oh, yeah, look out, here they come. I mean, the Padres are the second best team right now, and they just got swept on the road by the Mets. So, the other thing is that the Dodgers have a little bit of a soft schedule here for the next 10 days or so. I mean, they go to Colorado, who I guess has been a little bit better, and a little bit better at home, but then they have the Angels and they have the White Sox. I mean, so they should be able to survive in the short term, and then things ramp up a little bit. You get the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Brewers, and then the Phillies. So, it does get a little bit harder when you get into the beginning of July. We'll see. I think that they are still good enough to withstand this. But are they going to march to 107 wins and be the clear-cut number 1 team in the National League come October? Probably not. I mean, the biggest beneficiary of this right now might be the Phillies.
Yes. That's where I was going with this. Yeah.
In that, they would seemingly have an easier path now to being the number 1 seed, although you just saw what a wacky travel schedule and prolonged delay for some of their arms did this week. And you do wonder, especially with what we saw at the Braves the past couple seasons here in October, are the Phillies going to be able to navigate all that?
Yeah.
It's fair to wonder. So
That's my one big concern that remains, because I brought it up 2 years ago and I said this playoff format does not help the good teams.
And I kind of write it off, but then you watch Christopher Sanchez not able to throw a strike, and then you watch Aaron Nola not be able to get any break on a curveball. And yes, Zach Wheeler was very good against the Red Sox on Tuesday night, but then certainly was not himself yesterday. And
yeah,
I don't know at what point it's fair to say, oh, well, that lag is still in play. Could it really have impacted him yesterday? Maybe not, but maybe. I talked to 2 different people that went to London to watch the Phillies, and they were like, I was jacked up until Wednesday. And I'm not a pro athlete. That has to have a real impact. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. But I think that this Dodgers thing, Mookie Betts to me is the best player in the game. I think best all-around player. I think there's arguments for other players, but I think he, in my mind, is the best all-around player. So you lose the best all-around player, it's going to hurt no matter what. But I think that Dodgers lineup was so top-heavy that you take one of their 4 big 4 out of their lineup. Now, I don't know what they have how you replace it. I don't think that they have that next guy up mentality, that the player to come in. They don't have Edmundo Sosa replacing Trey Turner for 6 weeks. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they have that guy.
No, and I mean, I
don't know what's going to be like for them.
Teoscar Hernandez going to go off. Now, he's been a little bit better lately.
Yeah.
But who kills them is Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux is a guy that you were looking at to kind of take a step. He missed all last year, but in 22, he had 276. You thought you were getting a plus offensive player there. I mean, he's been dreadful for them this year.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm really going to be interesting to see what happens there, who they replace Mookie Betts with.
Yeah.
Because that's a big loss.
Well, you figure, like we said, you go through the schedule. They play the Phillies, I believe, the first or second week of July. He won't be back for that.
No. There's a chance he would be back for the time when the Phillies go out to LA.
Right.
But certainly not
here.
Yeah. So and then Yamamoto, I mean, we talk about bats, but he's got a rotator cuff strain.
Yeah.
You know, that's a tear in your shoulder as a pitcher.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's not, I don't care how much they say that it's not as, it's not as serious as maybe they thought. But hey, Kodai Senga, when was the last time he pitched?
Yeah.
Right? With that shoulder injury. He still hasn't made an appearance this year. He got hurt first day of spring training.
Well, I mean, the LA Times right now, like the headline here is Yamamoto could miss months with rotator cuff strain. So, I mean, at best, you're talking, if that headline is correct, you're talking like August, maybe.
Yeah.
And then really what you probably get here, if I had a guess, try to bring him back, start throwing in August. Maybe he gets back on the mound in September. Is he going to be the same guy at that point?
Right.
And you wonder. You hate to see that for the Dodgers, really.
No, you always want to see the best.
You don't want to see guys get hurt. You don't want to see premier talent get hurt. But I can't tell you that I necessarily feel for the Dodgers as an entity.
No. You can never feel for the Dodgers as an entity.
It's not good for the game. I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah.
I don't care about the Dodgers. All right, let's wrap it up. Cops are here.
Cops are here.
All right, look, for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. You follow Anthony on X or Twitter at AnSanFilly. You follow me at Bob_Wankel. Check us out anywhere that you get your podcasts on YouTube, and we will be back later this week.